Okay, is the Apocrypha still valuable for study? So first of all, let's talk about what the Apocrypha is. The Apocrypha is a collection of intertestamental literature. Oh, that's helpful, isn't it? Okay, so in the Bible, you got the Old Testament that basically was written from, or took place somewhere around 2000 BC until 400 BC. You've got the New Testament that's basically from, the birth of Jesus around 0 all the way up until John finished Revelation, which was about AD 90. But you can see that in between these two, there's a gap of 400 years. Sometimes it's called the 400 years of silence, but that would not be true because God wasn't really silent during that time, and it's not like there weren't any pieces of literature that were being written, and the nation of Israel was still functioning, usually under the oppression of, the Greeks and the Persians and the Romans, but they were still there. So during that 400 years, there was literature that was being written. There's a variety of different books that were written during that time that are important pieces of literature for Jewish history and culture. If you buy a Catholic Bible, it usually has the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Apocrypha in there. If you buy a Protestant Bible, it just has the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Apocrypha, I would say, is valuable for study. It's one of those things that would have been a part of what the New Testament writers read, not as scripture, but as history, and it would have informed their thinking. So if you say, I want to understand what the New Testament writers would have read in their time, the Apocrypha is valuable for that. You may ask the question, well, why do Protestants not put it in the Bible? Well, during this time, during this 400 years, and during the time of Jesus, the Jewish leaders and rabbis and teachers had a canon of scripture that they basically agreed on. It was the law and the prophets and the wisdom literature, which is the 39 books that we consider the Old Testament. When Jesus came around, Jesus affirmed that canon of scripture when he was talking about the law and the prophets. As he talked about that, that was his way of canonizing which books were the ones that he quoted from, submitted to, took part in his life. And if Jesus quoted from those, submitted to those, and called those scripture, as Protestants we say, that's what we're going to quote to, submit from, and count as scripture, and we're not counting apocryphal literature because that's not what Jesus counted. So, is it valuable? Yes. Is it scripture? Protestants would say no. I would say no. Christian Missionary Alliance says no. 39 books of the Old Testament, 27 books in the New Testament, that's what's officially the Bible.